Hello, everybody. This is Alex Newton from K-lytics, and we're going to have a webinar tonight. It's visual plotting, how to craft better stories in less time. It is a problem that a lot of people raised to me and said, hey, Alex, can you do anything about helping us solve this problem as to how do we efficiently get from a great book idea to at least the first draft, if not more. And I have here the experts to help bridge the void. This is a session that was originally planned for K-lytics members and people who used our reports. I'm hearing a lot of people also shared their invites. So we do have also some people here who may not even be familiar with K-lytics nor even know me. So I'm your host today. I'm Alex Newton from K-lytics. We provide ebook market intelligence for authors, agents, and publishers. I've been around for about 6 years providing market numbers to authors so that they know in which areas things are trending, what genres are trending, which ones are less competitive, very much shedding light onto the market. But today is not about me. It's not about K-lytics. Today it is about a very specific thing we want to tackle. First of all, a warm welcome to Cameron Sutter here. Hi, Cameron.
Hey, Alex, thanks for having us.
Excellent. Cameron, he brought his family picture. I love it. And he has a family to present, I shall say. 6 kids, 1 is missing in the photo. And next to taking care of his family, he is the father figure of a tool called Plottr, which we're going to look at. He first launched it as a 1.0 version in 2017. Now we are here in a much advanced version that you're going to see today. He's an author and he's a software engineer. And that is a really cool combination because he knows the problems firsthand from being an author, but he knows how to solve those using tech. And you're going to be amazed what you're going to see tonight. And I brought Ryan. Hello, Ryan.
Hello, Alex. Great to be here.
Excellent. Some of you will know Ryan from his product BookSweep. So if you are into the problem of how do I connect with my readers and how do I build a subscriber list as an author, Ryan is the man. Check out BookSweeps. He's also a co-founder of Plottr, and he and Cameron have been doing a tremendous job at listening to authors, seeing what your problems are in this whole plot generation, outlining part of your mission, and constantly added new things to the Plottr software. And the third person I brought today is Troy Lambert. He's the educational lead at Plottr. Now, he's a mystery and thriller author himself. He wrote over 25 novels himself, so he really knows what he's talking about, and he knows all your pain points in this part of the writing journey. He's been a special guest at various writing conferences and writers' guilds, and he will be doing the demonstration tonight. Now, as we still have people joining, as a word of introduction, we all know as writers that opportunities abound. Many of you know this picture here from my K-lytics presentations where we say every star in the sky is a genre or a trope, or it can be for you a character idea. No matter where you enter your writing journey, the opportunities abound. There are so many markets and reader groups out there that you can reach that actually the idea generation is very seldom the problem. From that point, though, we very often face a challenge. And that challenge is this abyss between the idea that you have, that idea addressing the market opportunity or addressing what you ever have in mind that you want to convey out there to the world in form of a book, and getting to the actual book. And we all know writing can be a long journey, but there are various ways and approaches to that journey. And the thousands of years of people writing books have probably led to a number of approaches and philosophies. And if one tries to be very black and white, George R.R. Martin from Games of Thrones really put it nicely into these 2 types of writers. He called them architects and gardeners, where he thinks, I think there are 2 types of writers. And he says the architects plan everything ahead of time, like an architect building a house. And he says the gardeners, on the other hand, they dig a hole, drop in a seed, and water it. In practice, it's not black and white. Many times people mix both approaches. That is very clear. But what comes natural to you may be more the one or the other. What is a striking fact, though, is that discussing which one is right can be a very emotional discussion that even the most famous writers of the world lead with pretty strong words and statements. So amongst those gardeners, also called the pantsers, you have people like Stephen King, who said outlines are the last resource of bad fiction writers who wish to God they were writing master's theses. Wow, pretty strong statement, if not a little arrogant, if I may say. But Margaret Atwood, for example, she also said the structure or design gets worked out for her in the course of the writing. And she said, I couldn't write the other way around with structure first because she felt it would be too much like painting by the numbers. Fair enough. If you have just something in your head and you know exactly where you want to go, of course you can just sit down and punch the keys and you can do that. But you have other people, such as take the John Grishams of the world, who say they're more architects. They're what's called plotters, where they go, the more time I spend on the outline, the easier the book is to write. I'm more of a structured person myself. When I do the K-lytics analyses and the reports, I want to plan ahead of what I'm getting into, plan out the analysis, because it makes my life easier, so much more so down the road. And here John Grisham says, and if I cheat on the outline, I get in trouble with the book. Now, very famous J.K. Rowling, she is also a person who basically mixes both approaches, but on some of her books, she did actually pretty meticulous planning. And this is what she had on Twitter. This is the original of one of her plot spreadsheets. In this case, not a tool-based spreadsheet, but on this sheet of paper that she used. I think it was for Harry Potter #7. I'm not quite sure on that one, but it's very interesting if you know the actual book and you hold that side by side, the actual book versus what was planned on that sheet of paper. So you see, there is not one truth, but today we want to talk in particular about what is it that can help you, that no matter which approach you take from the idea to the book, that you don't have this feeling that we have here on this graphic. You don't want to be stretched out or overwhelmed. And how can you build this bridge in a more elegant way? And that is what I'd like to talk to you today about in this webinar. And let's build this bridge together. That is why I brought my guests to you, and I hope you will enjoy this great presentation today by the whole Plottr team. I think there's a pretty exclusive event. Of course, they do webinars, but I don't know they have that many where they bring the whole team together, from the original idea generator to the both co-founders and the educational lead. Enjoy this presentation. I'll be back with you after the educational part of this. Of course, we also will have a great offer to you that you can make use of as part of this webinar, and we'll have a very extensive Q&A so we can answer all your questions, both about the product, the offer, or any questions you may have about plotting your novels and getting from the outline to the actual book. So without further ado, let's get into this, and I'll hand over to Ryan Z from the Plottr team. Ryan, over to you.
Awesome. And let's get started. As Alex wonderfully introduced us, we are going to be talking about how to craft better stories in less time with Plottr. So the first question you might have for us is, well, what is Plottr? So Plottr is a visual outlining and planning software for writers. It was originally released back in 2017, and we relaunched it actually in May of 2020. And since then, it's been downloaded by over 15,000 writers. And you might have seen it on a number of websites across the internet, including Mark Dawson's podcast, Readsy, Draft to Digital, the Alliance of Independent Authors. And in this presentation, we're going to talk about how Plottr helps you craft better stories faster. And essentially, as Troy is going to show you, it does that in a couple of ways. So it helps you visualize your plot points, allows you to create your story Bible and series Bible. It allows you to start with proven templates. It allows you to automate and customize your outlines. And it also allows you to export to your favorite writing programs and get writing. So briefly, what we're going to cover in this talk is, again, how Plottr works. We're going to have a special offer for everyone at the end. And then we're going to take all of your questions and answer as many of them as we possibly can. So with that, Troy, I'm going to hand it off to you, and I'm excited to get started.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'm just going to set up sharing my screen here really quick. And I'm going to show you a plot that I've actually created in Plottr. So I have a thing that I go through that's called plotting your novel in 7 easy steps and doing it very quickly. So I created this plot very quickly, basically using my own formula, but I did a number of different things that I'm going to go through with you. So can everybody see my screen? Everybody see my screen? It looks good. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. So this screen that you're seeing in front of you is the timeline screen. This is where we often start with Plottr. Is essentially, you start here by creating scene cards and timelines. You can see across the top here that I have beats instead of chapters, but you can use chapters instead. And I'm going to explain exactly how that came about here in just a second. And then running down the left-hand side, you're going to see that I have a number of plots. Now, if you know the Romancing the Beat plot line, you're going to recognize some of these things, but I'm actually going to talk about it in a little bit. This is a crazy idea I have. This is not a book that I've written yet. It is a crazy idea I had for writing romantic comedies where 2 serial killers who have similar tastes fall in love. And so I decided to go ahead and plot this thing out. This one happens to be called Meet Cute. That is not a spelling mistake. That is exactly what I intended. So for this one, the way I usually start in Plottr is I decide what kind of, we have structured templates in Plottr. And I just mentioned one of them, Romancing the Beat, but we have others as well. So when I started this project initially, I needed to decide how I was going to tell this story. So I'm going to click on the project tab at the top, and you're going to see a whole series of books. And we'll talk about the series in a minute. But the way I started this one was I decided I would test a few different of the structured templates that we have. So I tried the 7-beat rom-com structure. But for me, this just wasn't complicated enough. I'm more of an architect, and this is a very complicated story because it combines, of course, those top 2 genres of romance and mystery. And I really do think there's a niche here for serial killers in love. But this template was not going to work for me. So now I went to another template, which is I created a sleuth's journey template because I write mysteries and thrillers. And so I decided maybe I'll use the sleuth's journey and try to add some kind of a romantic element to it. The problem with that was that as I started to plot this particular story, that didn't work because the mystery was taking the lead rather than the romance. And I really wanted this to be a romantic comedy. So I settled down on Romancing the Beat. So I essentially set up this plot line by starting a new Plottr with a template. And that's one of the ways that you can start with Plottr is you start with a template. And you'll see if you're familiar with the Romancing the Beat that here I have the structure that comes over with Romancing the Beat that gives you directions in each scene card. These are scene cards, and as I open them up, you can see the different directions that are involved with Romancing the Beat and following that particular plot line. Now, of course, you don't have to follow these things exactly. They're really just suggestions to get you started. And I will say that this is simply the method that I use for using Plottr. There are a ton of different methods that you can use when you use templates. So I use this one, and then, of course, I create my own scene card up above it on the top on a separate timeline. Now, some people just replace the scene cards on the actual phases in the Romancing the Beat. I like to leave that there in case I need to reference it back. So we're going to talk about, in this particular one, we're going to talk about Clarice, who is one of our main characters, which I'll get to in a second. And this is how she starts her particular journey in Romancing the Beat. Now, but once I decide what template I'm going to use, which now I've decided I'm going to structure this around Romancing the Beat. It's going to be a little bit different because I have a mystery, I have other elements here, but I feel like this is a good structure. Then I'm going to move over to the Characters tab. Now, of course, in any serial killer story, there's a whole new meaning to fleshing out your characters. Pun absolutely intended. So I have named my characters. I've chosen names for them, and because I don't want to imitate the things that anyone else has done, I've chosen Charlie Lecter as my male serial killer. He's my main character. Tall, muscular dude with very good teeth. He loves to have his victims over for dinner. And of course, his love interest is Clarice Moonling, a female serial killer who deep freezes her victims after killing them. She's also a main character. And you'll notice that I've added some others down below. My detective has a first name. It's Oscar. You get the idea. There's also partygoers and a couple of different victims. The Debbie victim's name will become important momentarily. So at this point, then I flush out my characters. I develop characters that I think are going to be interesting characters because of the elements you need in a story is an interesting story, interesting characters doing interesting things in interesting places. Now, once I've set up my characters, then I move over to the Notes tab and I make myself notes about how I want to structure the story. And this is often just a place where I puke out different writer stuff that I'm deciding what to do with this story, because I've got this big idea, and the big idea of the story is the overarching idea of the book, but I need to get to the small ideas. So I need to decide on some plot points. Do they kill together for the final end result? Are they caught? Well, that would destroy the happily for now ending that I need with a rom-com. So I probably need to let that go. Then I look at the genre tropes. This is a mixed genre. So how hot should the tropes and characters be? How should they be handled? I have to make those different decisions. I've got a big idea. I've got a POV. What POV should I tell this book in? And then, of course, because there is an element of romance, the heat level should be closed door, steamy, hot as hell, or Carolina Reefer. And in this particular case, because it's a rom-com, we're going to keep things a little lighter and we're not going to go quite that intense. So once I look at notes, then I think of some different places that are going to be a part of the story. So I move over to the Places tab. And I set up some things like the Dark City Park, where the first murder takes place, Charlie's house. Often I'll throw pictures in here as well. In this case, I haven't thrown in pictures yet because I haven't developed exactly what the pictures are going to look like. But Charlie's is a large home, a large meat locker, obviously, an immaculate kitchen, a huge living room, which almost looks like a dance floor, which is actually going to play a role later in the story. And then as I move along, I add notes to my places and to my characters as I get to know them better. So really my first outline is just, these are generally the places that things are going to happen. These are some basic things about them. And of course, one of the most important places is Clarice's she shed, which is actually a large butcher shop and a large freezer where she processes her victims before freezing. So these are all just places where things happen within the story. And I know that things are going to happen there, but I haven't necessarily fleshed out these places a lot, okay? So I've gone through my notes and my characters and places. Sometimes I'll add tags as well about point of view and things like that. I haven't added a lot of tags to this particular story. But once I've done that, then I go back to the timeline and I start to move through the different parts of what the timeline is going to look like. Now, there are also, because of how powerful Plottr is, you can really use this any way that you want. If I decide that I want this beat 5 to be over in beat 6, I can simply move the scene card. I can put as much or as little information inside these scene cards as I want to. I can actually add certain attributes to my scene cards so that all of these scenes contain the same information, but there's different attributes here. Now, one of these things that I like to do is I use what's called goal, motivation, and conflict, and then a verb or an action word that somehow describes how I want the reader to feel by the end of this particular scene. I want them to feel Charlie's failure by the end of this particular scene, because that's what happens to him, is that basically his dessert was a flop, and someone who happens to be Debbie dares to point it out, and she later becomes one of his victims. So along with the regular description in your scene card, you can add attributes, but I always like to say you don't have to do any of these things. If you want to keep it very simple summary in your scene cards, you don't have to add anything at all on top of that. There's also been a recent feature where you can color your scene cards. What I use these for, and I've seen some other people use these for, is progress. As I write the scene, I color it green, which all that simply does is it turns it green on my timeline. It means I've already written that and I can move forward. So even if you write things out of order, I say, okay, I wrote the intro to Charlie's scene. In my case, that means it's written in Scrivener, and I can move on with writing the rest of the book. And so that's how I use these particular things. So scene cards are actually very powerful. The other thing that you can do is you can move any of these things around in any way that you want to, and you can delete timelines. So typically when I'm done with developing a plot, I'll actually delete the romancing the beat timeline, because I'll say, well, now I don't need these anymore, these guides anymore, because I've already set up my plot. Now, as I say, different people do it different way, but I happen to delete those before I then export things to Scrivener. So that basically sets me up with one book. Now, there's different ways you can look at things too. As you can see, as I was doing up the top, I can scroll from the beginning or the end to the middle. And then in the particular case of Romancing the Beat, I've got to move my thing up because I've got several plot lines, and I'm going to go all the way to the beginning, or I can scroll back and forth this way, or you can actually scroll out to the point where you can see all of your timeline in one large view. So you can scroll in and out of those things. So this gets me with, yes, question?
Wow, this was just a comment from Alex here at this point, because what you just mentioned, Troy, is up to this point, the person might have said, yeah, but I have all this in my notebook and I see those 50 sticky notes in front of me on the wall or the corkboard. And now you just filled all this up so quickly, and now you start things moving around, and you have all in one place in this tool, whether it's the characters, your places notes, your timeline, it's all there, and you can move, shift, merge. And I think this is the very interesting point where immediately for a person who wants to be a bit more organized but also efficient at it should have a big opening eyes into, wow, what this tool can do. At least for me, I now also use it for just planning out things. You can actually almost use it just like an organizer, where you have everything in one place, but in a very simple and easy to use manner.
Absolutely. So we've seen people in the Facebook group that have used this to plan goals. I actually have developed like a 1-year rolling writing plan using Plottr that basically just has the months. It has what I'm going to be writing that month, what I'm going to be editing that month. And then if things change throughout the year, like life inevitably happens, you were sick one week, you couldn't write, so that bumped your schedule a little bit, you just move everything a little bit. And I've seen people do it by 52 weeks. I am not that organized, so I do it by months, but you can do it by whatever method you would like. But the next thing that excites me about this tool, so when I first started using Plottr, did not look a thing like this. It was a tiny little baby software, and Cameron will tell you that one of the first things I asked for was, hey, what about a series Bible? Because what I wanted to be able to do was to take, I was writing a 50 novella series called The Capital City Murders, which I'm still in the middle of writing, and I wanted to be able to plot all of those in one Plottr project. Now that sounds really ambitious, but Cameron was like, all right. And so pretty quickly, one of the first features he came out with was a series Bible.
Yep.
So you're going to see my project here. The first part of the project was just me basically using these different templates to fill this out. But then I actually started adding other romantic comedy. If anybody wants to write with me in this series, this is fine. You can pick one of these titles and just email me, and I'm happy to jump in with you. Killer Love, 4 Funerals and a Wedding. I just added a whole bunch of different titles to this particular series. Okay. So anyway, that's the way the series Bible basically works, is for each of these, you can have your own timeline. Now, obviously, I haven't developed the timelines for these, but I can actually show you here. So if I decide to, you notice if I hover over the second line, it says use template, and I can choose a template from right here. I don't have to do it from the start. So I can say, okay, I like the Romancing the Beat. And you'll notice that there's 2 different sections here, and one of them is my templates that I've actually created, and another one is the starting templates that we have in Plottr. And there's several different types: Romancing the Beat sheet, Hero's Journey, Action Adventure. You probably recognize a lot of these, and there's more of them that are coming. The 3-story method is another favorite of mine. So if you wanted to use that one, it'll actually tell you what plot lines you're going to see, what scene cards you're going to see, and what chapters you're going to see before you start. And then you can decide, does this plot line fit my story or not? Or you can do how I did, and you can choose a few different ones and see which in different Plottr files and see which one works for you. So this one, we added that in, and you notice all the chapters have populated and all these scene cards with the various different instructions that are involved with that story method show up there. Okay, now I'm going to go back and actually show you how some of the other features work, essentially. So let's open up a scene card, and I'll show you some things that you can do. And one of the first ones is you can tag this with characters. So I can say, okay, the character in this particular scene is Clarice. She goes to kill the guy. Actually, I should add in Frank here because this is the only scene he's in because he gets killed. So I've added him in there into this scene so you can see which characters are in here and which places this particular scene happens, okay? And then we can add tags, and again, we can add color. The beauty of that is you can go up to this little thing here, which is called filter, and I can choose, obviously this is all going to be in one book, but I can choose only the scenes where Frank is in that occur in a dark city park. Now, a little warning is going to appear up here that tells me my timeline is filtered, and you notice that everything else is still there. It's just faint, but the highlighted ones are the ones that I filtered for. So if you have a book where things happen in a certain year, you create a tag or an attribute for a certain year, and then you can come in and filter your timeline and only see scenes that happen in that year or at that time, so you can see how those things work. Another thing that you can do moving across here is you can flip your timeline if you prefer to look at it this way. Now, this is something I've seen screenwriters do a lot, much less with novelists, but with screenwriters, I've seen them do that a lot as well. Where I showed you in the scene cards where you can add attributes, you can come in here and basically add some custom attributes for scenes and then save them as your own template for your own scene cards. So there are some formulaed ones that you can use, but you don't have to use the formulas. You can create your own formula, which is why this becomes so individualized. Another thing that you can look at is, so once you've done all this visually, sometimes this is a little overwhelming to see all this. So you can move over to your outline and you can see this just like you would a normal outline with everything in order, only you can see your tags, your places, all those different things are right in this element, and you can edit right from here. You can click in and edit, and that'll affect what's in your timeline. So you can do all the same things in the outline section that you can in the timeline section. The other thing you can do is you can filter by plot line. So if you have an A plot line and a B plot line, and you only want to see that plot line, you can see that and then see if all of that hangs together the way it should, that it really should. And then you can delete the filter. So you can even use this throughout your drafting process in your second draft to make sure that your plot lines all hang together, very similar to how you use binders and things in Scrivener. So that's just another way to do that. And the same thing in notes is you can filter your notes. So if you're working on a particular book, let's say we've got several different books written in this series and I'm only working on Meet Cute, then I can filter my notes and only the ones that are tagged with that particular book are going to be the ones that'll show up. So you can tag your cards by the book that they're in, and only the ones that you want, that you filtered for, will show up here. Same thing with characters. So if you're a George R.R. Martin, speaking of George R.R. Martin, and you've killed off a whole bunch of characters, you can tag some of them as dead, or use their attributes to add an attribute that tells you that they're dead, that they've been killed off, and then you can filter your characters to make sure that you're showing characters that are not. Or you can just show main characters. And if we do that, you'll notice that it tells us our list is filtered, but we only see our main characters in this particular part. Now, you can sort alphabetically. I never have enough characters to sort alphabetically. You can if that's what you're doing. And again, the same thing in places is you can add books and tags. So let's say the only book that this park appears in is Romancing the Beat, the Meet Cute Romancing the Beat. Then you can filter out places that aren't related to that book or aren't related to the particular part you're working on. And you can do that all by whichever method you want. And that's where tags come into things. In this particular one, I haven't created a lot of tags, but you can create tags for almost anything. And it just helps you add an extra layer of organization to your book. So you could put a tag that was like, that's drafting, which means I'm not done with this, and add another one that says complete, and then tag your scenes with either drafting or complete as you finish them. And then you can just hide all the scenes that have been completed so that you don't have to look at those on your timeline. So there's any number of ways you can use tags as some type of organization. So that's
Troy, what I really love already at this point is when the rare times I talk craft with my writing audience, I very often get in this question in moving from idea to writing this book that hopefully hits a market. And people say they have so many entry points where their idea comes in. Mm-hmm. Some people wake up at night and say, oh, I have this idea for this amazing character, right? Or you are cooking your dinner and the person has this great idea about this grande finale of a plot. And if you look at the tabs you just went to, what really convinced me about Plottr is I can choose whichever entry point I want to have. You can start jotting down notes. You think of this great place where you potentially just spent your holiday, and you put down notes on a place, or you directly say, I have this story in mind with this big 5 things happening, and you go to the plot line. And so any entry point is possible. And then whichever point you choose, you can either use a template for, if you think about a character in a book, these are the things you should cover, and or you just put your own stuff there, or you mix the two. And that flexibility can be used in so many things that have to do with a creative process, whether it's book writing, whether you work in theater, or whether you use it for fiction, nonfiction. I think that's really strong in the product.
And there's another huge thing that we can talk about right now, which that's a beautiful segue to, is there's an iPad app and an iOS app as well. So the other day, I had ideas sitting in front of the TV. I grabbed my iPad. Instead of going into my office, I try to avoid this thing. I'm a horrible workaholic, so I try to avoid going in my office. But if I have an idea, I grab my iPad. I can open up the exact same Plottr file because I saved mine through OneDrive. I open up the exact same Plottr file, add my notes, save it, and the next morning it's waiting for me. And I've been able to document those ideas that I had watching an episode of whatever, true crime stories or whatever I was watching, that has given me that thought process. And then I can document that right into my document right away. So that's a huge plus as well. There are so many different things that you can do. As you mentioned, templates. There's templates for your scene cards, but there's also templates for characters. So you can use a pre-made template like birth order, cognitive distortions, enneagrams. I happen to like goal, motivation, conflict is one of my favorites, but people will give their characters a Myers-Briggs test, and then they'll document that information here. And then you can have a ton of information about your characters that that you wouldn't necessarily, that you can decide exactly what you need and what you want in there, and understand what their psychological interactions with other people that have different Myers-Briggs types is going to be, things like that. So you can really get in depth as you want to get, or you can go as easy as you want to get. You can just use a standard character, or you can use the snowflake method and put all these different things, if you're familiar with that, and you can just put all these different things related to the snowflake method in about every single character that you feel that's important for. Now, what I generally do is I mix and match templates based on, is this a main character that I really need to know all this about? Or is this the guy that I'm going to kill in the next scene, and he's not going to live long, so it doesn't matter. And then the other part is you can add character types. So I've added victim as a character type because I tend to kill people a lot in my books, but you can add whatever you want in there as far as different character categories, supporting your character types for fantasy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I just happen to have added victim as my particular type. And so as far as a formal demo, that's what I've got. We'll probably get to your questions shortly. I'm going to turn it back over to Ryan, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about the special offer that we have for you today.
Troy,
that's really amazing. Yeah.
Troy, do you just want to show people exporting? That's the one thing.
Exporting. Yes. I'm going to switch screen sharing because I can actually show you an export.
And perhaps while we upload the export functionality, what I found really cool about the whole Plottr team, and that's why I brought them back, was when we first time launched this about 10, 11 months ago, this was already like a really amazing product. But what fascinated me is how the whole team, also through the Facebook group and direct feedback, kept listening. So there was the thing about, hey, this is so cool, this virtual notebook that I can use in this super structured way, but can I directly export to Word or Scrivener, tools that I already use for the actual writing process? And that was made available. Troy, you mentioned, yeah, but so many people also have ideas on the fly, and you are in the bus station and you don't have your desktop with you and you just want to jot down ideas. And so there is basically the iPad version, the Android version of it, completely synced with what you have on the desktop. And so before we also look here at this exporting functionality and some other nice things, I just wanted to convey the message. This is a tool from writers for writers. That's something I think which really sets it apart from many other writing tools and gimmicks that I've seen along the way.
Exactly. And the whole reason I loved this so much when I first started talking to Cameron about it long before this was even a big deal at all was because it was by writers and he was listening to writers. And so when I said, hey, Scrivener export that exports the way I want it to, and different things like that, basically he listened and said, all right, we can develop that. Now, there's still some features that I asked for that he rolls his eyes and looks like, because he doesn't want to make them because they're hard. And I know that.
But that's the developer in him. That's not the writer.
In him. The writer in him sympathizes with me a lot. The developer in him says, oh my goodness, am I sure about bringing this guy on board? But yeah, anyway, but basically here's your export to Scrivener. Now, this is because as I said, normally when I do export, I would eliminate like the instructions that you have and the different things like that you have that show up in here. I normally would eliminate some of those things before I exported it. But this is when I just straight exported from what we just had, what you just saw. And you can see if you're familiar with Scrivener that in the inspector over here on your right-hand side, this is where your notes come through. And this tells you what plot line this was. And this is where my notes have come through about this particular scene. So I can just start writing this scene right away. You notice that down below as well that my characters have come through. And it basically comes through with the description, any notes I put through, and the category that I put that character in. As I said, and many things, once I've actually developed a plot further, this would even be more fleshed out. But anything that basically, the point is, anything that you enter into Plottr is actually comes right through here in Scrivener. And so you can see this may be an ugly one, but you can see that normally I wouldn't have these other little scene cards underneath. I would just have unjust desserts, but I can start writing right here. And the thing I like about it is there are some other tools that when you export to Scrivener, your notes show up in the document part. The problem with that is your manuscript doesn't start at 0 words. It starts whatever words you had in your descriptions. And for me, I'm just really picky about that. It's a thing with me. It's something I don't know if it's necessarily important to other writers, but I like that manuscript to start fresh at 0 words and know my word count going from there and not have it mixed up with the different descriptions and stuff like that I've done. But this is basically, I did this at a touch of a button. I just put export Scrivener, but there's also the functionality of a custom export. Do we have time to show that real quick?
Let's do it.
Switch over. Yeah, let me switch over to that particular screen really fast because this is another thing that I've been pushing for a while, which is basically, so when I come through, when I share my screen to Plottr here, I'll show you, there's a button up here that you see that's export. You can hit export and you have choices of MS Word, Scrivener, or advanced. So if you're a person that uses MS Word, I'll actually show you that in just a minute, but I'm going to click on advanced here to show you what options you have. So for Scrivener, you can decide for your outline exactly what you want to export here. And if you want to what you want to export about your characters. Do you want to export the templates, the tags that are involved with your characters? Well, I say, I don't want really the templates. I don't need that. I don't necessarily need the tags. These are the only things I need. Then I can click those things, and those are the only things that I'll export. I can export my notes without the title if I want to. Places, I can decide what I want to add to the places. Maybe I don't care about the tags because tags for me are going to be more writing stage or things like that. So I don't necessarily need those. So I can decide what I want to export it, and only what I exported goes to Scrivener. It's the same thing with Microsoft Word, is essentially your title page. Usually I don't like the title page if I export to Word because eventually I create my own title page that then I import into Vellum. So I'm going to leave the title page out. I'm just going to export these basics right here. And if I hit export, it'll just start this process. It'll ask me where I want to save this. In this particular case, I'll just save it in my downloads file. And then I'll open that up real quick. And basically, if you're familiar with using Word anyway, you're basically going to use the navigation pane to move yourself around Word. Let me open this up really quick. And so basically you can see that my outline has come through. I've got my Pilcrow on because I was doing some editing. So you can see that my outline comes through. This, of course, includes all those directions because I didn't delete those. Goal, conflict, and setback that I had in these different things. And then if you open your view, if you're not familiar with this in Word, I apologize for getting techie on you, but you should be. And you notice that you've got your navigation pane over on the left-hand side, and you can move to various different points in your story very quickly you can actually move these things around. And that's a whole other class on using Word as opposed to using Scrivener, but that navigation pane is extremely valuable. If you haven't learned to use it yet, highly recommend it, even if you're in the editing phase of doing things. Anyway, and that's about it for me. So yes, Celinda, it exports to Word or Scrivener, whichever way you want to go. And you can customize either one.
Amazing demo, Troy. Thank you so much for that. And with this, let's hand over to Ryan quickly, who's going to present to you the special offer we have for the webinar audience, the time-limited offer and the time-limited offer here for the week to come. Pay attention. This is good stuff, and you also get a great deal. And then we have 20 minutes or so for the Q&A. A lot of questions have already been answered here right in the chat, but I think we should cover both beginners' questions and those people who are already advanced using it. We'll try to get through as many of those as possible. So Ryan, over to you. Ryan, you're still on mute. If you could unmute yourself.
Oops.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Alex. Thank you, Troy, for the great demo. And thanks to everyone in the audience for watching. But at this point, you might be wondering, is Plottr a tool for me? Is it right for me? Am I going to use this? These are reasons authors give us for why they like using Plottr. So A, you're a visual thinker. B, you might already have a process, but you don't really enjoy it. It doesn't really seem intuitive to you. C, you're disorganized or repentant pantser, meaning you kind of write your stories by the seat of your pants because you don't really know what else to do. And D, you worry about pacing and losing sight of plot holes. So if any of those kind of ring a bell with you, this is a tool you're probably going to want to consider. So now I want to share some case studies with you. So Michael Anderle, who is the founder of 20 Books to 50K and an Amazon best-selling sci-fi and fantasy author, says that Plottr is a box of 128 Crayola crayons with a sharpener in the back, begging me to have as much fun as I want. And I love that quote. He says that before Plottr, he used Excel and Scrivener, but he found that Plottr is a more natural outlining tool for him. After Plottr, he finds missing scenes. He can add them easily, which helps him save time, improve structure, and have more fun writing. Celia Kyle, who is a New York Times bestselling romance author, says that she saves so much time and energy when writing due to Plottr. Before Plottr, she described herself as a disorganized pantser, notes pretty much everywhere. And after Plottr, she's able to find it easier to verify facts and timelines while plotting and writing. And this guy, Troy Lambert, who you might have heard of, says that if a story just feels wrong or isn't working, he can pull it apart scene by scene and put it on a Plottr timeline. Before Plottr, he tried Scrivener, Post-it notes, and mind mapping, but nothing quite worked for him. And after Plottr, he uses the templates, as he just went over in the demo, to map out first drafts and uncover plot holes before publishing. So Plottr includes all of the tools you need to plot. It includes visual timelines and custom outlines, the story Bible functionality we went over, characters, places, notes, and tags, starter templates like the hero's journey, romancing the beat, and many more, the ability to create your own timeline and character templates, and time-saving tools like the Scrivener export, Microsoft Word export, and auto-saving functionality, among other things we can go over in the Q&A. We also have a long list of upcoming features that we're excited to get to this year and moving forward. So one of the next things on our list is actually act structure, which will provide the ability to group your chapters or beats into acts or some higher level structure, along with the ability to create configurable headings so that you can auto number your chapters or beats however you want to use them, but they'll all be auto numbered the way you set them up. We have a search and replace functionality in the works, along with the ability to create a kind of chronological timeline. So anyone who's familiar with Aeon timeline, this is basically going to replace that kind of functionality right within Plottr. And we have a whole lot of more functionalities coming up. You can see on our roadmap, and I'll post a link during the Q&A so you can see all the things that we have, and you can vote on your favorite features, and you can add your own ideas as well. When you get this, if you decide to sign up for Plottr today, you'll also get access to certain bonuses. So 10% off of book sweeps promotions. We have a deal on BookBrush, which is a tool to help you create social media graphics, along with some other things. So I'm excited to share our special offer with you. What we're offering to you for the next week is 20% off our lifetime offer. So typically that's $99 for a single license, $149 for 3 licenses, or $199 for 5 licenses. And here you can see the adjusted prices if you pick up the deal today using this lifetime offer discount, which includes a 30-day money-back guarantee. It includes updates to the desktop software for life, all the upcoming features that we had planned for desktop, and the bonuses I mentioned. The one thing this does not include is we have a web application plan for later this year. This would not give you access to that, but it will give you access to all of the updates forever for the desktop and mobile versions. So I'm going to leave this slide up here for now, and I'm going to post the offer links in the chat in just a minute. and then we're going to head over to the Q&A.
So first of all, big thanks to you guys and the team also for putting up this offer. And I can only say the lifetime deal is a deal because, as you see, Cameron as the lead developer and Ryan, they're still very young. For Troy and myself, I don't know whether I would go for the lifetime deal. The younger people and those who have kids around, I'm just kidding. You know, what I really want to say is the lifetime deal is the deal because the team is constantly improving the product. With many of the updates, you get enhancements, you get new features, and you can lock in this one price at this point in time and benefit from it for good for your whole writer career. So that is why we put up this special offer, particularly here for the lifetime membership.
Yeah, so a few people have questions about the licenses. Each license allows you to activate Plottr on one device. So for example, if you have both a Mac and Windows computer and you want to be able to use it on both, you would need 2 licenses, which would mean you would want to get the 3 license deal. Likewise, if you want to use the license, if you want to use Plottr on both desktop and mobile, you would need a license activation for each of those. So if you have a Mac computer and an iPad and an iPhone, you would need 3 licenses. And so the number of devices basically is equal to the number of licenses you would need.
Excellent. Now we're going to repost the link here a couple of times in the chat. For those of you who don't have access to the chat, what is the link they can go to, Ryan?
So I've just posted those in the chat box, at the bottom there. There's not so I'm going to post those again for everyone. But those are direct links to the checkout. If you want to use the coupon code independently, the code is KLYTICS, KLYTICS. And you can go to our pricing page and you can apply that code to any of those pages independently. I'll post that link as well in case you'd rather go that way. So if you go to the pricing page and you then add in the KLYTICS discount code, you will get the discount.
Perfect. So it would be K-lytics in that case without the hyphen. It's just KLY and so on. K-lytics without the hyphen. The brand is obviously K-lytics, but that doesn't work with a coupon code. Minor detail, but it may save you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jim, for signing up. That's great. Kat has a question. If you already have a license, how do you use the code? In that case, you might want to email us at support and we can help you out from there. So that's support@plottr.com. Just send us an email and we can help you figure out the upgrade issue.
That's terrific. All right. So let's also take up some of the questions. And I think we may want to divide the questions a bit between those people who are basically totally new and are about to decide whether they should use plotters. And I do recognize here from the question, we also have some more advanced users already who do use it and have questions also for Plottr going forward, etc. So the one thing I picked up here from the question box was if a person is like, totally new, that sometimes they say they feel overwhelmed by so many features. So can they use parts of Plottr or do you have to use the whole thing? Can you pick and choose? Perhaps you, Cameron, or Troy can comment about this. That you also, so is there a gradient path into learning how to use Plottr, or do you have to know the whole thing to efficiently use it from the start?
I would say absolutely. In fact, what I recommend for people when they get started is start simply with the things you need to use and build on your knowledge from there to advanced features and go, oh, I want to be able to sort by this method. Oh, then that means I need to learn how to do this thing. There's tons of tutorials. What I found was that from the very beginning, Plottr was extremely intuitive. When I first started using Scrivener, there was a learning curve. There was a definite learning curve. And so I took an entire day to just figure that out. What are these features? How do I use this, that type of thing? And how do I just write in this thing? In Plottr, I found that the planning process was very intuitive from the beginning. What I had to learn was the advanced ways that I could use that process that I hadn't thought of that were enabled in the tool. So I would say there's definitely, you can start at the beginning and just go on there and start creating scene cards and a timeline.
Troy, do you want to show what it looks like when you just start with nothing on it?
Oh yeah, sure. Let me...
One question I want to address, Gigi has asked this a couple times, and I said we'd get to it in the QA. She was asking, or this person was asking about how to use this if you're revising an existing manuscript. If you already got something in Scrivener and you're halfway in the book, what do you do? How do you get that into Plottr, or what do you do there? So there's a couple tactics you could use. One is just saying, okay, next book I'm going to start using Plottr, or you could start saying, okay, everything that I start writing right now, I'm going to start writing in Plottr. You can copy and paste from Scrivener as well, or you could just slowly move things from your current story into Plottr as it makes sense to you. But currently there's no import function, but that's definitely something we're working on.
Molly wants to know if you can speak a bit to how the syncing works, Cameron.
Yeah, syncing works. So Plottr saves things as files on your computer. And so you have complete control over them. You can move them wherever you want on your computer, organize them however makes sense to you. And that means you can also take advantage of things like Dropbox and OneDrive and all those cloud file syncing services. And when you put your Plottr files into one of those services, you can access it from any of your devices. So any of your computers, any of your mobile devices, you can access those right from within Plottr, or you just open them on each device from Plottr. And then as you save them, they get updated to the other devices. It's not real-time updating, but it's as long as you close one after you edit and open on the other device, then you're good.
Okay. And Ryan, this is what it looks like when you start from nothing, with no template, no nothing. This is what it looks like. This is in the upcoming novel that someone is going to write called Killing Actually instead of Love Actually. And so basically you can see that my notes and characters and stuff have followed me across from the other book, but I could filter those out because I'm in the series Bible. But initially you would start with nothing in these places, and then you can just click and add whatever note you want. You can add images to your notes, and so this will add a thumbnail image, but you can also add an image within your note, actually the description, the content down here too. So you can add pictures anywhere. So that means you can add some extra pictures, make that a nice extra large picture because we all want to see that. But you can, so there's any number of things you can do. When you start with a blank note, it looks just like this. And you can tag it with anything you want. You can put any title that you want. This is a new note. That's what it looks like. Same thing with characters. When you start with a character, you have a choice. You can use one of the templates we talked about, or you can start with an absolutely blank character that just has some various different attributes in here, and you can change these. You can delete the ones you don't want. You can choose a character thumbnail. And again, if you want to add another character image, you can do it down here in the notes as well. You can see where you can add an image, or you can link out. Like I link out to resources a lot with my Capital City Murderers books. I link out to a place because I have my main character going to eat somewhere, and so I wanted to know what's on the menu there, so I can make that as realistic as possible. So I'll link out to the menu on whatever there, and that'll work. But when you start with an initial timeline, it looks exactly like this, and you can start putting cards wherever you want.
But can you start adding some in there? Great.
So this is scene 2. So you can add it just like this, and then you can type something in here. This is information I need to know. Or you can use a template. You'll notice when you hover over this, you can use a template. And we have some already in here, which is proactive, reactive. So a proactive scene is something where your character is taking action. There's a goal, conflict, and setback. There's a reactive scene, the reaction, the dilemma, and the decision, or scene essentials, and you have all these different things, or you can add your own things in there, like this one I talked about, which is my goal, motive, conflict, and verb, which I use a lot. So if I choose to use this one, this is scene 1. And when I go over here to the attributes, I can say the verb is fear. I like that one. My goal is survival. The motivation is, let's say, children. The person wants to survive for their children. And the conflict is someone is trying to kill me. Just like that. And I can put in a description of the scene as well as the attributes, the killing scene.
And Troy, Tamara wanted to see how she can save her own plotting template. Can you show how to do that?
Sure. So let's say I had this, and let me add a subplot. And this is a romance. And let's say this was, of course, and this is, of course, I only wanted 2 chapters in this. This is a small little thing. I can say, okay, I want to save this timeline that I've created in here, and it'll create everything on here. So I can do that as a custom template, and I'm going to short romance. I can put a description if I want to, romance short. If I have a source for this, like you're using a romancing a beat or whatever, and you want to put the URL to that, you can put that in there as well. So that gives you an idea of where did I get this idea from? So you can go back to there for reference if you like. And once you hit save, you'll see the little thing come up on your screen that says your template has been saved and is ready to use. Then let me move to another book where I don't have anything, the Killing Planner. Instead of the Wedding Planner, I've decided I'm going to use. And you'll notice that my short romance template has now appeared up here. And the plot lines that I created, the main subplot romance, and the scene 1 and scene 2, I choose that and it populates those things right here. That makes sense? That answer the question?
Wow, that's great. The whole thing.
Sorry.
Yep.
Earlier, Shelley asked if there's a style Bible. or plans for one. Shelly, if you could type out that idea more, it sounds really interesting. It sounds like something we would like to do. We don't have any plans for that right now, but if you could give me some more details, we'd love to think about that one.
And then one other thing we haven't actually shown, Troy, is the dashboard.
Oh, yes. Let me show what the dashboard looks like really quick, because the dashboard is where you initially start things. So the dashboard is essentially, this is where you start. You can create a blank project, open an existing one. You can see that my most recent ones are down here. You can create from a template. You can import Snowflake Pro if you're into that type of a thing. The important thing that I like to show people here is also the help tab. So you notice that there's different tabs on your dashboard. The help tab will take you to places exactly kind of what Ryan was talking about. Our roadmap, which will actually, this will open a browser window and will tell you what our roadmap looks like. If I click, or you can request a feature, it'll take you to our Facebook group. And there's tutorials, demos, all that kind of stuff. And each one of these opens a web window. Of course, because I'm sharing my application window, you won't see that, but it'll open a web window that goes to our tutorials, our frequently asked questions, all those different things. So you can get to anything Plottr related, including like your recent files, any backups, your settings. So you can say do you want to update automatically? Do you want light or dark? I have this set to light, but usually I'm working in dark mode. Different things like that. You can change those settings there. You can look at your backups, my multitude of backups, and then you can look at your account as well and upgrade and stuff from there. So you can look at all of those things on your dashboard. And that's the way you usually, if you open up Plottr and you don't have another project open, this is where you start.
So as said before, the team is constantly improving this. That's why the lifetime deal is the deal to go. It's a very neat interface. They pay attention to the big picture. So what do you really need as a writer and how to improve that? But they also pay attention to the details, that things are enhanced with every update that comes with the software. So I'm very confident to say you'll be in very safe hands with the Plottr team, both from an operational point of view, but also a strategic one. You see already Cameron asking here right in the chat, hey, can you write a bit more about this idea you have here about the style sheets? And this is how I saw, I'm also a little member, a spy member in the Facebook groups writing there. And it's just great to see. I've spent time in the corporate world for 25 years, including IT and other industries. And the question is always, okay, shall we make the change? Shall we improve? Also, Plottr is a business and they have to make decisions about what is on the development roadmap, what isn't. But what I see is always an open ear and people who know the writing world and know the writer's needs. And if you checked out their website, they've grown the team, and people like Troy there, who are basically from the author community, right in there in the team to help constantly improve this, what you have here. So I'm also going to repaste the link for the links for the 7-day deal. Please copy and paste it, save it in your desktop or a little notepad. If you're undecided, come back over the next 7 days and make use of this here that we have for our audience. Excellent. Cameron, Troy, Ryan, do we have further questions here that we should take up? Obviously, we could go on forever, probably, but let's make sure we have the most important topic solved. Also, Cameron is putting here the couple of email addresses, support@plottr.com. And if you have questions to me, you can always contact me at support@KLYTICS.com. That's K-lytics.com. And we also saw here the emails from the Plottr team. All right,
Molly,
Cameron.
I'd like to see if we could share the bonuses again really quickly. And then Dory had a question about different upgrading licenses and things like that. Feel free to send us an email at support@plottr.com and we can figure that out for you.
Yeah. Another question someone asked is, can you write in Plottr itself, or is this something you just plot in? So Troy, do you want to speak to that?
It's a great question.
Yes.
I had that question, I think, once for Cameron already, to see whether he's going to... First, we have the plotting and outlining, and then Plottr is going to take over the word processor world as well in writing. Let's see what Cameron can let us in on here.
What should I say? So one of the reasons that Plottr is good is because it focuses mainly on plotting, and we're trying to be really good at that part of the process, the plotting process. Yeah. That being said, it is possible to write your story in there. And some of the features that we're coming out with in the near future will make it easier to write in there, but so far it hasn't been the focus. If you try and do everything for everybody, you end up not doing very much for anybody.
Yes.
And I can only concur. I live in Switzerland, and this is where the Swiss Army knives come from. You have these neat little ones, it's only a knife edge, and they don't take it very far. Then they have a couple of useful tools. And once they get like too big, you don't even carry them in your pocket anymore. So it's good to focus on a couple of things, on a certain specific part of the writing process. And I don't have the exhibit with me, but it's so interesting. You have this author idea on one end, and then you have the reader on the other end. And there's this creative part, and where Plottr helps you in bridging that from idea to the book. And we talked about K-lytics, making decisions about which market do you write for in the first place. And then there's all these other mechanical things. And if you try to invent a Swiss Army knife that takes you from market research to plotting, to the actual writing, to categories, to keywords, to ad planning, nobody could ever do that. So it's good that you carve out a really distinct part of the writing journey and add value to the community there. And I think that's what you do a really great job at.
Thank you.
So it's a question for Troy, I think. How can I use Plottr for revising an existing manuscript or using it for books I've written before buying Plottr?
Okay, so we've actually done this exact thing, and I've given a couple different talks on that. The essential easiest way to do it is take your draft and pull it apart. And so you take the scenes that you've already written and you put them on a plot line, and then you see where they fit. And do you have holes? And what template should you be using? A template structure? Did you try to use a template structure? Did you miss? Did you hit? We did it with a friend of mine's book that I was editing for him, because I do a lot of editing too. I do less editing than I used to, but I still do a lot of editing. And we essentially just pulled his book apart, scene by scene, chapter by chapter, put them on a plot line, and then we could see this scene actually needs to move here. There's actually holes here. So even if you're a discovery writer and you're writing into the dark, once you have written that first draft, if you pull it apart and put it on a plot line, then your second draft goes much faster, because then you understand, what did I mess up with my first draft? If I did, here's some ways I can fix it before I start the rewriting process. So that's the simplest answer. The longest answer could be a webinar all on its own.
So
maybe it should be.
Troy, another question for you, and I think it would be helpful if you shared your screen for this, is can you show people how you can use multiple templates in the same timeline?
Oh, yes, I can. So if I just start with a blank project, I've got nothing, and I haven't decided on a template yet. There's a couple of times when I've used more than one template in a plot at the same time. And one of the ways that I've done it was I used a 12-chapter mystery formula, or no. Let's see here. Yeah, I used a 12-chapter, or I used a action-adventure plot, and then I used one of the romance ones.
Romancing the Beat, romance beat sheet.
I think it's a romance beat sheet, this one here, because they lined up actually really well. So basically, I had essentially a romance, kind of a romantic comedy thing going on. This was another crazy idea I came up with a webinar, and then I've since written it. It's called Call of Karen, and it's where Karen and Cthulhu fall in love when Cthulhu's on vacation in Delaware. And that is Internet Karen as well. And you can see that these two actually line up pretty well. The romance beat sheet and the heroes and the action adventure basically line up so that the acts are in very similar places. The pinch points are in very similar places, so that you can parallel the two different things. Now, to do this, what I would actually start to do is I'd say, okay, this is 18 chapters here. This one's 12. I know I'm going to move the final resolution over here, or actually, I'm going to move the final resolution right here. This is actually going to run into this denouement right here. And my climax for my romance is going to be somewhere in here. And so I'm going to start moving scene cards around so that the beats actually start to line up on these various different things.
And then you can delete the other plot lines that aren't relevant to the...
So like this one, in this particular case, I would just basically delete that top plot line right away because I'm not going to use it. And this is probably where I would I would actually move this one up next to that one. And I would make this probably a pink color, because it's going to be my romance, and it reminds me that it's supposed to be romantic, so I don't kill anyone on that plot line. And then essentially what I do is I move these different scene cards around to make sure that the beats of the two line up. so that the beats of the hero's journey, and sometimes I use that to avoid the sagging middle, is the beat lines will be staggered a little bit so that the action adventure ramps up, and then there's an equal ramp up in the romance in the next chapter. So the reader has a couple of chapters before they can really catch their breath, and helps you create those potato chip chapters that the reader's like, just one more, and pretty soon turns into a whole bag of plots and they've read your book all night. So that's the way
And can you also show people how to create the scene stacks?
Oh, yes. So let's say in this hero circumstance, let's say I want to create a scene stack, which I showed you. It was actually in the other plot. You can actually add a second scene in chapter 1. So this is hero scene 2, because I want to take 2 scenes to show his actual circumstance. And in the main plot here, I'm also going to have the opening of the romance here. So on my main plot, I may also want to add, just go ahead and add the opening romance. But basically, I have all these things in one plot line. Now, this can get confusing because you've got these 3 things, and now I'm not able to see all the bottom of my things. So what you can do up here is, wait.
On the plot line itself, just go to hover on main.
Yeah, that's right. It's collapsed. So you can collapse these so that basically you see that there's 3 scenes, but that you don't see all of them. So basically that enables you to go along here and go, okay, if you create another one here, the same thing's going to happen. Mission part 2, and you're going to see there's 2 scenes there, and then you can go to this and expand so that you can see everything. So there's different views that you can explore with that. You can also move these around. There's a couple ways you can move this around. I didn't show you this before, but let's say you want to move this a long ways, or let's say I want to move this to chapter 4. I still want to keep it on the same plot line. I can go to this drop-down menu instead of trying to drag it. So especially if you have a long fantasy and you're dragging it to chapter 36, and that doesn't work. And if I hit chapter 4, you notice this immediately moved over to chapter 4 and stayed in the same position underneath here. So this drop-down menu does help you move things without having to drag them back and forth. Or you can drag them and make that work for you, but you can also use the drop-down menu. And if you want to reorder them, you just put this one on top, and that reorders it as well. So you got a lot of flexibility once you create those things with moving them around as well.
And can you show what that looks like in the outline?
So in the outline, okay, so you would see in the outline, we're going to see that we've got the main plot, and then we've got the hero scene 2 and the opening romance scene. These all show up in the same timeline. Chapter 2, same thing where we added a secondary one, mission part 2, and receives a mission, and those are in that order. But then I can, if I move them here, because I move that one back up on top, it also moves it in the timeline. So anything you do in the outline is just mirrored in the timeline. It changes everything wherever it is. So you can move things here as well. Yep.
And can you show, so you can show people how to edit it. So you can see, as you can see, is Troy showing you how you can edit it in the outline.
Yeah. Hero circumstance is revealed. Let's say I want to put a little more information there. And then, so on that one, then immediately when I go back to the timeline, you'll notice that it's added that to the title. But in the outline, so you can edit the description. Circumstances revealed, and we glimpse his or life. Save that. We go back to the timeline, we hover over that, and you'll see that the text inside the scene card has changed as well. So anything that you do in the outline basically mirrors itself. Any movements you make or any descriptions that you add basically move with it into the timeline. You can also notice on the outline, people also wonder what these like little squares are, and what that does show you.
I was just about to wonder, right? But here we come directly to the assurance and plot holes and these sort of things.
Exactly. So these things are basically, these are the plot lines that are in that particular chapter. So you can see in this chapter, there's 3 on the main plot, and we have basically the romance and the main plot down here. So when we go into outline, those things are all, you can see all those different colors here. And this is also where you can filter by plot line, and you can say, okay, I only want to see the romance beat sheet because I want to make sure my romance hangs together without my action adventure plot. And then you can go through these and make sure they all hang together. And you notice that some of the other chapters obviously aren't in here, but we've got chapter 16 and 17 after chapter 10. So there's a whole gap where we have nothing about the romance beat. We should probably fix that, by the way, but that would be part of the development process. But then we can just view by that timeline and make sure that everything hangs together and that all of it works, and you can just unfilter that. So you can do it however you want. But this is just one example. I've done this in a number of different scenarios. If you want to add a secondary romance to your story, basically, you just add another beat sheet and sprinkle it throughout your original one, and you can organize things that way. You can do it however you want. But this just happens to be the way that I'd like to do it. And then if you like this and you're going to write a series that are going to basically have an action adventure and the romance beat sheet, again, you can save it as a template and say, okay, this is my custom romance, and romance action template, and save it. And boom, you got another template you can play with.
And can you show people, so to just transitioning from the series idea, can you show people what the series view looks like and how people might use that?
So the series view, this is the first book in this. And so you can edit this and say, okay, this is book 1, romance adventure. Good grief, I guess I can't spell romance today. And then you can, as you move along, so basically you can start this by saying, what's the name of this series? And so we can say, we've gone to K-lytics and we've determined that romantic adventure is a great genre to be in. And so we're actually going to put those keywords in the name of our series, romance. Then we can put our premise and theme if we have those particular themes. And that gives your series a title. Now you can add more books in the series. So there's book 2. Okay, now, but the other thing that you can do is up here into the drop down, you can see that we're on book 1, but there's also a series view, right? And so we'll save this name. So we've got the romance adventure series view. Now you can go over to timeline and you can create a series timeline. So let's say this is book 1, and I want certain things that are going to happen in the series to appear in book 1. Book 2, and obviously have more beats than that, because you can have a small plot line within book 1 that's your B plot line that continues throughout the series. So you can actually map out your series timeline instead of just mapping out the timeline for each book. So generally speaking, especially if it's a shorter trilogy or series, I tend to have some kind of hero's journey that's happening here as part of the B story that the reader is following along that drags them through the series. And so I actually plot that out here. So maybe I want to use this and I use a hero's journey, and I'm going to space out the different chapters along that. And so I'm going to change these to book 4, book 5, whatever the case may be. And I'm going to space out these various different things throughout that. So that's just one of the ways you can do it. You can still use a template even in your series view if you're trying to create a running V story. And there's various different ways you can do that. So
Troy, Ryan, I know this is not a right to market or plot to market seminar, but I cannot re-stress enough the importance of series. Now speaking not from a market research, but from a consumer point of view, a reader point of view, I read a couple of series where I really felt, wow, each book standalone was like really a full product and a really good story in its own. But the writer was able to craft this story that spanned like 4 books, and you always felt like at home in the individual book, and you felt at home as a reader, as a consumer in the overall thing. And it led into that grand finale. And that was actually, Cameron, after the first Plottr K-lytics webinar we did together, where I looked as a reader at the book with a different mindset, looking from a plot point of view. And I was there as a consumer and saying, wow, that was really high quality, that overarching story where I felt no way that person, that writer, had been able to do that just on a sheet of paper. That there was like, you could really feel there was planning going into the whole project. And this is why this feature is so amazing. Also from a how to create a quality product when you're in the series business.
Someone has a question. She says, I've got 7 books in my novel delineating turning points in the overall story. Would I just label one of the chapter heads at top, say book 3, and then move on with its chapters?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, what I would do currently, and maybe Troy has a different approach to this, but yeah, I would just say, so in this case, the books are like Act 1 or Part 1 or something like that. Yeah, I would just change one of these chapter headings to like book 1, book 2, book 3, and then leave that column blank. But I did mention in the chat that we're soon releasing a feature called Act Structure, which will let you have those chapter headings, change them to be Act 1, Chapter 1, Scene 1, or if you want Book 1 or Part 1, whatever. So pretty soon here in the future, you'll be able to do it differently, but that's how I do it currently.
Awesome. And then one more question, Troy. I'm hoping you have the file available. Do you have the file for tomorrow's nonfiction event? Because John has a number of questions about how can we use Plottr for nonfiction. And so if you have that file available, you can show that.
Yep. Let me see if I can pull it up here really quick. I have it. Fortunately, it was on my...
So this is a preview of a forthcoming event in our Facebook group.
Yes. So this is the nonfiction Plottr for how to market a book. And so we basically, there's a few different, you can see a lot of scene stacking going on here because of the type, the particular type of book this is. This method is just one of the methods that you would use for nonfiction. There's essentially the top level outline, and then we broke this apart by what you need to know and what you need to do, and then takeaways. And so these are all things that are included in each of these chapters or each of these sections, like marketing fundamentals. There's something about essentially the way this book was structured by Reedsy is basically there's information on what you need to know, then they tell you what you need to do. And then at the bottom, there's takeaways at the end of each chapter that basically are like the answer for people. So hopefully that helps. It helps you understand how you can use this for nonfiction. We'll obviously go into that way more in depth tomorrow. But that's the basic type of structure, and there's any number of structures that you could use. This is just one of them.
Can you show the characters and places?
Oh, yes. So in this particular case, for the characters, in the characters section, I've used this for concepts before with nonfiction, but in this particular place, there actually are characters. There's the author, you as the author, and there's your target reader. And then there's some supporting characters that you have, which are your email subscribers. Obviously, some of these fall into your target reader. Reviewers, social media followers, the silent majority, which is something that Ricardo talks about in this book pretty extensively. And then your street team, which is another aspect of that. And then in this case, also, we've used places. In this case, we've used places like Amazon, BookBub, your email newsletter, Facebook, promotion sites. So essentially places that you would go to market, basically places you go to market your book or tools you use to market your book. And then your book market is another place, that type of thing. So this is the way we've used this particular file. And then we're able to label the parts of the timeline with what this has to do with. Is this talking about Amazon? Is this talking about those different things? And what does that look like?
I mean, coming from a business world myself, the nonfiction world, and having read so many nonfiction books, I can only tell you this is extremely strong, because that structure that you impose upon yourself with this plot name, like what you need to know, what you need to do, and what the takeaways are, really enforces a discipline on you as the teacher or the person, the authority that has something to say. Do not be sloppy and just say, oh, there's what I know, but to really add value from chapter to chapter and add value that induces action in the reader. And this is really a great structuring, but also quality control tool that takes your nonfiction project to the next level. I can tell this right here off the bat, looking at it as a nonfiction person.
Yes, I think it's more important. It's very difficult in my mind to write a nonfiction book as a discovery writer. You can't really write nonfiction into the dark. You got to have a plan. Otherwise, it's probably not going to be that great of a nonfiction book. And that's my opinion. But so I think having a structure like this, which this is actually just a very basic structure that you use for blog posts for everything, is tell them what you're going to tell them, what they need to know, tell them what they need to do, and give them some takeaways. And that you could use that for a blog post structure, a book structure, anything like that, where you're doing nonfiction and you're instructing people. And so it's just a really simple, this happens to be just a really simple one that this particular book fit into extremely well.
Yeah, absolutely. This is really amazing. We still have so many people online. I think we could potentially go on for 90 hours. So let's take the last couple of questions as they come up. Ryan just reposted the offer once more. Perhaps, Ryan, you also want to, in closing, put it onto the screen one more time. And what is the name of that book by Ricardo? Yeah, look at Ricardo Faye or Reedsy. I'm sure you're going to find the book on how to market a book. Exactly. Thanks, Troy. And by the way, also a great book. Ricardo put a lot of knowledge into that one. So first of all, thank you to all of you who attended this webinar. Thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Troy, for this great presentation, for the great demo, for also taking the time and patience to address some of these questions. I just looked at the chat, and some people, just to quote some people, which that really resonated with me, where Gioneta said, I'm a pantser, and this has got me excited about plotting if it is fun, and then my muse will want to play. So to all of you who are not so much into planning, I think we have here some converts. And then also what I liked here, Molly said, I'm so happy about this software since I first downloaded Scrivener ages ago. You guys are awesome. I feel like finally, and that is what resonated with me so much here, I finally feel like I finally have a way through the things holding me back with my first fiction project. And I almost have the same feeling again. I never wrote a novel myself. I'm a market research person. I'm a business person. But when I saw these plots and the templates, I thought, this is really an access point into getting your first fiction book written. And I got appetite again, so I may give it another attempt myself. I shouldn't lean myself too far out of the window, as we say in German, but this is really inspiring. And I think that's what's always important at these webinars too, that they inspire you to take action on something. And I hope that you will pick up this offer and have fun with it, and that you do what you want to do. Write your next best book, and write a book that does extremely well in the market and makes readers happy. So with that, thank you so much. Take the discount code, which is going to be valid for the next 7 days, for the 20%. And with this, Troy, Ryan, Cameron, thank you so much for doing this. And to all of you out there, happy publishing, happy writing. This is Alex Newton from K-lytics, ebook market intelligence for success. Thank you.